Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to Empower Your Voice, Unlocking Your Podcasting Potential with your host, Lillian Caldwell, CEO slash President of Passionate World Talk Radio Network. Educate, enlighten, entertain. And tonight, we're going to talk about three primary topics that a potential host doing a podcast must learn how to do before they actually go on the air or do an on demand, which is a pre record of their podcast. And the three topics we are talking about tonight are the 7 C's of communication, the art of the interview, not only the person or your guest who you're going to interview, but if you yourself are invited to someone else's podcast, you have to know how to answer as a guest. And the last, but just as important, is I forgot, hold on, all the excitement, mastering your interpersonal skills, i.e., people skills. Because if you cannot relate to your audience, then no matter how good you are in your presentation, it's not going to fly. And let's face it, here at PWTRN, my station manager, Jeannie White, and I have a saying, it's the content, silly. And if your content isn't good enough, your potential audience won't listen to it. So what are the 7 C's of the communication? Clear. You have to craft your message so that your audience understands exactly what you're trying to say. When you do an oral presentation, what they call audio, or even with a video, you need to make sure your audience understands the first time around what you're saying. It doesn't help them if they raise their hand and say, what exactly do you mean? Define it. Somehow you've gotten lost in translation. Clear. The second one is concise. You have to get to the heart of your content immediately. No more, let me take you around the block. I'm getting my wind up. I'm getting warmed up. You know those blue books we used to use in college? And the professor would write back on the back, please get rid of all those empty words that don't mean anything, but they sure take up a lot of room in these blue booklets. Well, the same thing applies when you're doing an audio or a video. You have to be concise. You have to know what your topic is, which means, yes, the dreaded word, homework. Number 3, concrete. Use vivid examples and relatable stories. The way I'm just doing, where I involve you, the potential audience, listening to what I'm saying. If you don't capture your audience attention with what you're saying, I used to tell my students, go back to your backyard, dig a hole, and throw yourself in, because it's a waste of time for everyone concerned. Correct, fact check, and ensure accuracy, which means that you have to be exact in your details, what your teachers used to call supporting material, to back up your evidence, to back up your facts, to provide relevance to what you're trying to say. Yes, you need to do that when you're speaking. Coherent. Organize your thoughts, which means when you take notes, you want to take down the key words and key phrases. If you're taking down someone else's words, make sure you put them down the way it is with quotes, and also be sure that when you present your material, that you reference the fact that this is Dr. John Glenn's words for when he walked on the moon. YouTube has they don't like people who plagiarize or use other people's words. So make sure you use your own words. And a hint, don't paraphrase, because paraphrase is like, well, talk about empty words. Is you're still taking somebody else's words and using them for your own edification. Courteous, be respectful and considerate. So if you have something and you're interviewing a lawyer or a judge, you're going to call the judge your honor, and you're going to call the lawyer Mr. whatever their last name is. Well, not everybody is that formal, but some people still prefer to be addressed properly. So make sure that you find out what title they want to be addressed in. And also, more importantly, if they have a foreign last name, make sure you can pronounce it correctly. I've been caught several times, even after practicing the name. And finally, I say, and do will introduce himself, with the understanding that no matter how hard I practice, I still seem to make a mistake with that name. And the same goes with other vocabulary words that you may not understand or know how to pronounce. So make sure you learn how to use them and use them in their courteous fashion. And the last one, completeness. Cover all the relevant aspects of whatever information you're taking down, so you don't leave the listening audience up in the air trying to figure out what exactly you just said. It's important because when people ask for a transcript of your program or of your podcast, they want to see that you do know how to read and write and spell and use the correct grammar, and make sure you understand the material that you just did your research on, in order so that you can convey your thoughts, your opinions, any advice, or what they're learning from you. Very important. Now on to the art of the interview. Well, anybody can interview. Well, not quite. There's a real art to doing it. The first thing you have to remember is what you were taught when you did research in the newspaper and you had to stand beside your desk and recite to the class what you just read, the title of what you just read, the author who wrote what you just read, and then convey in your own words what the newspaper article was all about. So you have who, what, where, when, why, and sometimes how. And you should always keep those questions in mind. And what you need to do, and I suggest it very strongly, if this is the first time you've ever done an interview, is to write down some of your questions ahead of time for your own sake. Now, you may become involved with your guests who ask you to send them the questions so they can read them ahead of time and then prepare the answers. Or sometimes, if a PR person doesn't think you're up to snuff, they will send you a list of questions for you to ask. But in any event, make sure you cover the 5 W's along with how, because it will cover all the material. Now, if you're a guest and you're invited onto somebody else's podcast, what do you need to do? The first thing is, if you've written a book, please read it before you go on the air. Mark down sections that you feel are relevant or important for your audience to hear about. You can inject some of your own comments or put it in such a way that the host asks you more in detail what exactly you mean. 2, be mindful of the time limits. Depending on how that podcast is set up, some people have commercials. So if it's a 30-minute podcast, you have the intro, then you have about 12 minutes worth of talk. You have a minute or two for station identification and the commercial. You have another 12 minutes to wrap everything up. And then you have the ending where the host summarizes everything. So make sure you understand that. Also, as a guest, you will be curbed if you start wandering away from your material. Be specific, give your details, and if you need to or want to, or you've been asked to, read a portion of your book. Pick a small chapter, practice reading it, and then have it. In any event, if you're doing a video, you want your book with you so you can hold it up and people can see the title page with your name on it. It'll make it a lot easier for them to identify when they go over to Amazon to purchase the book. Then the third one, mastering your interpersonal skills, people skills. The two most important points is accountability and responsibility. When you are trying to convey your content, your message to the audience, make sure you let them know where you've gotten some of your material from, especially if you're using direct quotes or you're using statistics. You will be surprised at some of the questions your audience will ask you, whether they text you it or they put it in the email, or if it's a live program, they put it in the comment section. Where did you get your stats from? What year? And you better be prepared to supply this information. The other thing is, sometimes the host will turn around and say to the audience, does anyone have a question? What we call interaction from the audience. And you better be prepared to answer any question, which means that you need to be able to think on your feet. And more importantly, be able to have an intro, a body with supporting material, and an ending, which is a synopsis of what you just said, so that the audience will get their answer. Now, you're not always going to have a ready answer for the audience. So you're going to say, I will get back with you in 24 hours. Please email me and give your email with your question, and make sure you include your return email, and I will have the answer ready for you. You can't be prepared for everything. Case in point, I had written a book about 25 years ago called Teenagers, A Bewildered Parent's Guide. And after I gave the lecture on it, someone from the radio audience called in and said, my kid is gay. What should I do? Well, nowhere in any of my notes did I really address that. So I told him, do you love your son? Do you love your daughter? Yes. Well, that's all you need to do. It's their lifestyle, their choice. But it's you, the parent, who provides the love and the guidance, and leave the rest up to them, because they will figure out. How old is your child? And he told me, and I said, just love him and discuss what's going on in their life. And I said, if you really are concerned, go contact a licensed therapist for the whole family and go in. And yes, I said this on the air, and I was told by the producer I did a very good job, because most people would have been so flabbergasted being asked a question that's so out of what they were trying to speak about that it would have silenced them for more than 5 or 10 seconds. And when you're on the air and doing a live program, dead airspace isn't acceptable. So remember that the next time you go in. You are responsible for what you're going to be saying, and you're going to be held accountable for how you say it. Don't antag the audience. So, Lillian, what does this have with people skills? Everything, because you're talking to a listening audience who can turn you off if they get bored, if they become dissatisfied, or they don't like what you're saying. Audiences are not trained, and especially on internet talk radio, everyone from the space station to the alien spaceships can listen to you if they turn on the right streaming frequency. So there you have it. 3 important topics to becoming a potential podcast host. The 7 C's of communication, The art of the interview and being interviewed yourself and mastering your people skills. Think about it. And if you're interested, please go over to https://education.passionateworldtalkradio.com/masterclass, and you will find more information telling you where you can pick up potential transcripts and also training for learning how to podcast from A to Z. And in the training itself, you interact with the trainer, which is I, Lillian S. Caldwell. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. When you have questions, you can text me at 484-364-1032 or send me an email, pwrnetworkllc@gmail.com. Thank you very much and have a good day.